Skull Beverage. We're live at 10:22. I'm back. First thing, I want to apologize for the last live feed. When I was down at Westech, I was in the truck, the truck feed. I lost signal. The service down there in that area in that industrial area is not good. So, I try to drive around and find a good spot, but and it's a good spot for a little bit and then it goes away. But what we were talking about and what I want to cover more, so I'm back now from testing. I got tested this weekend, ran the 5.3 liter again. So I wanted to go over what we did there, and I won't go into too much detail on the turbo results because we're not ready to release that stuff until the turbos are here. But we could talk about some of the stuff. What I did was I went down and we had the 5.3, the L33, the aluminum motor. So we put another like 45 pulls on this thing. I'm excited. We'll have to do a celebration when we get to 1,000 pulls on this thing, because it's probably coming up on it's somewhere in the 650, 700 range right now, which, and this is a tangent. We're going to go off in just a little bit because I want to talk about this for a second. When you tell people that, oh yeah, I ran this motor, I have 500, 600, 700 pulls on it, they're like, that's ridiculous. You're just going to wear the motor out. I'm like, no. That's nonsense. I know it seems like a lot, but this motor already had 100 or 200 or 300,000 miles on it, whatever it had. And then I started doing the math on it, because I remember talking to this about the Engine Masters guys. They're like, oh yeah, I put this engine together and we broke it in, and then in 4 pulls or whatever, it's ready to go. It's perfect the first time. I'm like, look, you're full of it. Because nobody here, including Bischoff and Kazi and guys really do this, have that few. They have hundreds of pulls on their stuff, because you have to go find little things. So this guy was blabbering about, just gaslighting people or whatever. But the point is that, and I know that on my Engine Masters motor, I had somewhere between 400 and 450 pulls on it to get everything dialed in so that it was the best that I could possibly do. With all the things that I knew and the amount of time that I had. So that worked out good. And the people were like, oh, that's a lot of runs. The motor just wore out. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not wore out at all. Think about it this way. If you went out and let's say that a dyno pull is the equivalent of you doing a full throttle run in your car or your truck. 450 runs or 450 pulls is, like 1 to 1.5 full throttle runs in your car or truck a day over a year. I mean, how long do you own your truck or car? How many full throttle runs do you do in a day? Sometimes we don't do any. Sometimes I just drive mine around and don't go to wide open throttle. Sometimes I do a lot. And other guys, and especially as you're younger and you're racing the thing around, you do full throttle runs like all the time, every opportunity you can get. So doing that many times on your car or truck, you're like, I didn't wear it out. In fact, I wanted to talk to Dan if he comes here, maybe today or tonight, and ask him on the cup motors. What I'm wondering is, after because I know that this motor, even after all these pulls, repeats perfectly. If I put it back on, it makes the same power. So there's nothing that's gone down on the motor. It's still the same as it was. At least it's the same as it was when I ran it the very first time. It's still making that power. So it's not worn out. And my question to somebody like Dan, who's done some cup stuff, is I'd like to know, like, after a 500-mile run, like a race at Talladega or Daytona or whatever, when they run something for 3 or 4 hours at a time, and at the end of the race, like, how far off in power is that motor from the way that it was at the beginning? Now, we know that valve springs over that length of time, the valve strings can start to soften up. We know that that's a thing. I just don't know if ring seal or any of that stuff goes away over that period of time. I'd be curious to see how much power they make before and after, to see if they're not down at all, if they're down 5 or 10 or 50 or whatever the number is. I'd like to see that. And I'd like to see it even more so for the 24 hours of Daytona or the 24 hours of Le Mans. I'd like to see a motor run on the chassis dyno before the race and then run on the chassis dyno again after the race. Obviously, assuming that they didn't overheat it or nothing catastrophic took place, that it is doing still what it was supposed to be doing. Like it's still running these lap times. Because we know that when you have a vehicle and you're running in these kinds of races and these kinds of endurance races, the lap times don't degrade based on the motor going away. So I don't really think that it does. So I just would be interested to see. I just was thinking about that on my long drive home. I have lots of time to like contemplate things that are going on. But at any rate, what I did when I went down there this time is we took the 5.3, the aluminum L33, and I took it apart because we were going to run the boost up. We were going to run more boost on it because we wanted to do some more turbo testing on it. And so last time we had run it to 700 or 750 or something on one of the runs. I think we had one run that was like 750 where we had a little bit of runaway boost issue. But I didn't want to go any farther than that because we wanted to, I hadn't ever checked the ring gap in it. It just is the way that it came from the wrecking yard. So obviously I'm always telling you that you should put ring gap in it, but I have not done that on some occasions also because you just get lazy and you want to get stuff done. And I know full well that if something breaks, that's on me. I did that. I didn't, the tune will be right because I can make the air fuel and the timing what I want it to be. And I know that when we're dynoing, it has cold air. It has a good air to water intercooler. It has the water's cold. It has a lot of things going for it. We have good octane fuel because we're running on E85. We know that nothing bad is going to happen to it from an error that we make. And so it would be, and a loaded dyno run doesn't really last very long. 10, 15 seconds or whatever, depending on how long the sweep is. So that's not going to happen. But if I did break a ring or broke a piston because the ring seized, that would be on me. I'd be okay. I did that. I didn't check the ring gap and there wasn't enough. Obviously something happened. But so we went down. I'm like, okay, we're going to turn the boost up. And before I do that, let's take this thing apart and let's do ring gap on. So, okay. You could take it apart in like a half an hour or something. It's really fast. It's just more of a mess than anything else. It's like oil everywhere and stuff. And so you try to make sure that goes away. The other thing that you get to do is, and this is maybe the worst part about having a junkyard motor, is that you take it apart. You're like, oh yeah, this is like awful inside. It just makes you want to take everything apart, send it to the machine shop, have them clean everything, and then at least put it back together. Like, even if I don't care about like rebuilding it or boring it or doing anything, I just want it to be clean because it just looks like there's big chunks of stuff that could come off. And so there's lots of stuff in the pan as usual. And so I wiped out after dropping the pan and taking the windage tray off, taking the rods out and taking the pistons out, checking the ring gap. And the interesting thing is, and we talked about this a little bit on the last live feed when I was down there, is I took the pistons out and it already had a ton of ring gap. They were over 30. So there's way more than it needed for a 3780 bore, but it had more than it needed. This was a standard size piston. It wasn't bored over. It was a factory piston. It's a factory rod. All of that's the same. The rings looked weird. They looked shinier than, that's the only way for me to describe it. They just looked shinier than stock ones did, than the last ones I've taken apart did. I don't know if they're standard rings or if somebody has replaced them for some reason. The other thing that looked odd on this one is that normally when we take these LS motors apart, even on high mileage ones, you can normally still see the crosshatch in these things. It might be faint, but it's still there. This one looks like it's kind of glazed over. There's no ridge at the top, so there's no wear in the bore other than a surface finish change, let's say. So there's no big ring gap or ring ridge at the top, which shows you how much the bore has worn, basically. Because right there above the ringland, when the piston's at TDC, there's no contact there. So it doesn't wear. So it stays the same size as it was originally bored when this thing was put together. The rest of the cylinder can wear. And on small block Chevys, that could be a lot. I mean, it's enough that you can't get the piston out. But that's almost I've never seen that on an LS motor, and less on Fords than the earlier Fords and the small block Chevys. They don't tend to wear like that, which is why this discussion about, oh yeah, the rings wear or the cylinders wear. The cylinders are not wearing. So if there's any extra piston, if there's any extra ring gap, either it was put in at the beginning when they put it together, somebody did something to it in between the time that they had it and the time that you got it from the wrecking yard, or the ring itself wore. But the problem with that discussion is that I'm going to do a calculation on how much the ring would have to wear to equal another 5 or 10 or 20 thousandths, extra ring gap. It's a lot. And that's highly unlikely. I think, I don't think that the ring would do that in order to change the gap that much. Because most of the rings that when we take them apart from the wrecking yard, the factory ring gap is in the teens, and they're doing that because they want to try to eliminate blow by. They're worried about an emissions thing and better mileage and stuff. I haven't seen a big change in power from doing these ring gaps on the NA motors. And this one makes the power that it should. And when we did ring gap on the Big Bang motors before we put them together and ran turbos on them, they still did the same thing. So it wasn't, and I wasn't careful about those Big Bang motors. Those were 30, 35, somewhere around there. But the nice thing is, I checked them and just put them back in. I didn't have to cut them. And although the cutting them is really the kind of the fun part, it's easy with that Total Seal like ring gap tool. That's kind of nice. It's very fast. It's very efficient and very accurate because it's got a dial indicator on it. If you set 10 thousandths, it takes out about 10 thousandths on it. So that works good. So there's not a lot of like when you're trying to do it with a file, like in a vise, or sometimes I've used the Wizzy wheel, but that's really, really touchy. There's not a lot of checking and rechecking going on. Sometimes when you're doing ring gaps, especially the old school way, you might have to check it like 6 or 8 times. So you're taking off a little bit, you check it, take it off a little bit. Here, I just go, okay, look, it needs this. And I just do a big quick cut. Okay, we're going to take off 8 right away. Because honestly, I don't care if it's like, if I wanted 28 thousandths, if I cut it and it's 26 or it's 30, I might cut a little bit more off if it's 26, but I'd rather have it be 28 to 30 and anywhere in there is fine. And even if it's more than that, we're going to run it because a lot of these were more than that anyways. So it tells me that's why there weren't any problems with me running boost before. I don't know that there would have been even in the teens, but there definitely wasn't now. So it's just, we put it all back together. It's in this configuration. It had the 799 heads on it. Had the ARP head studs. We put, I think these are Fel-Pro MLS gaskets on it. We had the Richard Holdener Performance low buck truck camshaft in it and the BTR springs on it. So thanks to the guys at BTR and AFR and SCAT and all those guys. And then ran it with a Trailblazer SS intake manifold and a throttle body, the 90 millimeter fast throttle body. And then we ran it NA again to see what it would do. And it did exactly what we would expect and did just, kind of repeated pretty well. In fact, if anything, it might have made a couple more, just, and then we did a whole bunch of turbo testing. That one of the things I wanted to do, but we didn't get it in time. And that's just on me for not ordering in time was, and I will do this the next time I go down, is people want to know about the Trailblazer SS intake manifold versus the stock truck manifold, which obviously I have both of them. We want to run the Trailblazer SS, but without the 90 millimeter throttle body on it. We want to do the adapter, put the 78 millimeter throttle body on there, and see if any of the gains that you get from the Trailblazer SS are a function of the bigger throttle body. That's almost not going to be the case. I can guarantee you down low. So when we start seeing gains from the Trailblazer SS, it's before the thing would need extra airflow. So we know the manifold is going to be responsible for most of, if not all of the gain, especially at lower power levels. Now, what if we get where we were doing that test on a 500, 550 or 600 horsepower motor, then the airflow thing would come into play. But for the average guy on a 4.8 or 5.3, I think they could, most of them are going to be able to get away with it, but it's a test that I want to see. And I haven't seen it out there in internet land, in LS land. So I want to do that test, and we just kind of want to see what's going to happen. We'll also be able to data log the vacuum kPa and see if there is a change, because if there is a change in power, we expect there to be a change in kPa. If there's a, if we lose power by putting the smaller throttle body on there, there should be a definite restriction, and we should be able to see that in the data log. We did, in addition to this, the thumbnail that I have up is the Fowler Performance. And I apologize for not having used this way earlier, but this is the first time that I ran it, and it did very well. And the cool thing that we did, and we have a bunch of videos coming up on this stuff, is that I had run this motor before. We told you that we were doing turbo testing, and all that data will come out. But one of the things that we did was, when we ran it last time I was there, we ran a single-sided turbo setup. So we ran one side with just a regular NA header, and we ran the exhaust from one side of the motor feeding the turbo, and then the turbo blowing into the motor like it normally does. So the motor's turbocharged. It's just getting the exhaust energy from one side. So we did that test last time, but when we ran it, I ran it with the header. I ran it with the DNA shorty, Chinese header that we have run on lots of stuff that we had run on the Big Bang motors and stuff. Just ran one of them. So we ran that header feeding the turbo. This time I switched over to the manifold that you see there. And I have a question for you guys. And I want to know if anybody has ever run these. I mean, I know Matt had done a bunch of stuff with this guy. He seemed like a really good guy. I talked to him and he sent me out the stuff. I don't know that he's in business anymore. So obviously I've had these for a lot longer than I should. But I ran the same situation. We ran this manifold, the one that you see in the thumbnail. We ran that manifold feeding the same turbo with just feeding exhaust from one side on this, the same intercooler, same turbo, all that, same motor, all that's the same. And so we have a good comparison between the long tube header and this. In this particular instance, we're not looking at, I don't care about and guys might, but I don't care about the, the power output gains, if there are any, from a header compared to a log style manifold like the one that we're showing in the thumbnail. That's not why I did this test. What I wanted to know, and the thing that you guys should want to know, is because this manifold is more compact than the headers, had shorter runners, has a smaller diameter opening, did it change the response rate of the turbo? And this is particularly important in this instance where we have less exhaust energy feeding the turbo. And obviously I'm doing a big video on this too, so you guys know, so the live feed guys know, it does make a difference. This style manifold with the shorter or with the smaller, this has a 2.5 inch opening. That's what size V-band clamp we use. And you can see on the thumbnail, it has the short tubes and then the log style deal. It's really nicely done. It's a nice piece. And then he hasn't made it so that he had made it so it's modular. So you could run this as a single or a twin, in the single, they could be looped together and stuff. But he had this T section that you V-band clamp onto the exhaust manifold, and then that routes to a V-band to a T4 in this case for the turbo. And then on the front side, it's just another flange for the wastegate, and we put a wastegate on there, but we did not use the wastegate. I just ran a boost line to the top of the wastegate. You could also cap it if you wanted to in this instance. We did not run a turbo. I mean, we did not run a wastegate, and we ran it in exactly the same configuration with the header too, because we found that we weren't needing to control the boost, because the way that it came up, it, with a header, it kind of had more of a centrifugal turbo kind of, or a centrifugal blower kind of power curve. So it doesn't really have all the exhaust energy that it needs, let's say, to feed it in that configuration. But when we did this other exhaust manifold, the response rate was much better and the power output is much better. But only it's much better only because it got to such a high. It started out with more boost and ended with more boost. So we're going to do some fun things with that coming up later on, and hopefully have a package where we can do a manifold and a turbo with no wastegate and just do a single side turbo for guys just on the cheap. I mean, I think it'll work great. And so that would be a kind of a fun deal, because it would be way less expensive to do it that way. So we're hoping that that's a thing. Even if it's not a thing, it's something I'm going to do. And I want to get somebody to do it like at LS Fest or something. Just, you know, we got to do different things. We got to do like fun stuff. And so we ran a couple of the different turbos and ran a bunch of testing at different boost levels and all kinds of stuff. So nothing but data-y goodness and turbo-y goodness, and there's some billet-y goodness going on there somewhere too. Charlie Brown, what's going on? Sean, Todd, what's going on? Thinking about grabbing some C5R heads. Anybody know? Anybody have any experience with them? I don't have any. I think that the only time I've ever seen any, I remember Brian Tooley talking about them, but I remember some of the Sam guys, maybe they ran some way back in the day. Frank, Neil, Blue Collar, what's going on? Daily Italian tune-up. Took the day off to Car Farm, picking up a big black Mopar surprise for my dad. It's not just Omnis. All right. Hey, drive safe, man. Let me know. Let me know if you get that. I'm kind of curious to see. Send me some photos. Ben, you're about to answer my question last time about the $100 5.3 with sound bearings. I found a 6.2 crank for $140 with 4,000 miles. So the owner claims can use this crank. Yes, the 6.2 crank is fine. A 6.2, a 6.0, a 5.3, a 5.7, all those cranks are the same. They're all the same stroke. They're all the same dimension and stuff. But that crank you're going to have to rebalance it with that piston and rod assembly, or with whatever piston and rod assembly you're going to use. I know I have to replace the reluctor wheel. Yep. I was thinking, since I'm going to do an LS swap, can I keep the 58 reluctor and get a P59 PCM and the sensors to match and still drive by cable? I don't know that. Somebody else, some other tuners might be able to answer that. I don't know if just the computer is different, or if the harness is different, if the pin out is different. I just don't know that. I would suspect that it is, but I don't know how much of it would be different. Theoretically, can't you run a tighter ring gap on ethanol, methanol cars versus flex or gas-only cars? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. They make more power, they make more cylinder pressure. So do they impart less ring heat on it because of the temperature being lower? Maybe. I'd like to see. I don't even know if Plex data is going to give me that information. I don't know how that's going to translate, honestly. Maybe I'm not smart enough to know how that's going to translate directly into ring temperature. Since the other things affect ring temperature besides just power, what I suspect is that we would be nitpicking this and it doesn't matter. But maybe yes, by 1 or 2 thousandths or something. I just don't know what it is. Caleb, 232, 242 cam, LQ4. Can I put 799 heads, mil 30, and not have piston to valve contact? Yeah, probably. I don't think that would be a problem. The cam that we have in there right now is bigger than that. I'll be cleaning up the 5.3 this week. It's been cold and rainy here in Arizona. Parts are transit, waiting for the weather to clear. It was nice down in Westech. I mean, it was one of the days, it was like 77. So it was beautiful and sunny. I got a little bit of rain driving down there, but it's nice here today too. Got the Sentra ready. Nice. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm excited about your Sentra, man. That's very cool. You might have unknowingly picked a non-factory aftermarket reman or rebuild installed in the donor vehicle. My motor is a factory bore size, though, so I don't know that it's a rebuilt one. Good dedicated tools are worth the money when you use them all the time, but for the average guy, the time spent DIY is worth the savings. Yeah, I mean, going to Westech is really, really nice because they have all that stuff and it just makes life a lot easier for me. And I obviously, I love those guys and that's why I continue to go there and will continue to go there, I'm sure, my whole life. But having that stuff makes life a lot easier. I don't know that I would spend a couple $100 on that tool. Having used it now, I probably would. But before I had used it, I don't know if I would have or even could have. Max boost is 16 PSI. Should be around 260 wheel horsepower. Nice. Let's see. Extra time spent DIY. Wish these comments had edit sometimes. Could the Olds 455 be on the table for another addition to the other guys? I would like to run one. That would be cool. Joey's a great guy. He had an unfortunate injury that hinders his welding. I was fortunate enough to snag one of his cast stainless T4 logs. Really nice work. Oh, Joey. Okay. An unfortunate injury that hinders his welding. Oh man, that's too bad. I was going to reach out. Does anybody know Blue Collar? Do you know? Have you seen any? I was going to reach out to him and Matt and see if anybody has run these manifolds. If you can mount a turbo on either one of the sides with all of the factory accessories intact. Trying to make a high-low octane spark table on HP tuners. Idle was tricky enough. Tricky trying to smooth the spark. It's been bouncing between 4 and 15, but I think I got it sitting at 14 spark at idle. Total my 2008 Subaru Outback. Uh-oh, someone tapped me from behind on the freeway. Got me out of shape. You okay, Todd? Sorting out tools is an issue when you have more spanners than their sizes. You have 17, 13 millimeters. That's a lot. It's got my 2-liter turbo ATS dyno with 269 and 310. That's good. That should be fun. I like those little turbo motors. Too many good deals. Building aluminum 5.3 using almost all team parts for the rebuild, including a camshaft that has exact same engine specs as a BTR truck cam. So far, I'm pretty impressed with the quality. Okay. I'm sure that's probably Temu, right? Is that what you're talking about? The things that worry me about those are lifters and camshaft metallurgy. And then, I mean, in some of these things that people have bought camshaft specs, like they buy a cam and it's supposed to have like aftermarket specs, and it was like a stock spec. And then I've seen some of the metallurgy be like flat tappet cam stuff, flat tappet cores, which you are not going to be able to run. So if you find a source and it does all that, we know that there's bad stuff out there. I'm hoping that there's good stuff out there too, and that you do well. Would you be willing to put a link in the comments for that ring gap tool? Yeah, Quinn, actually, if you go do a search for Summit Racing and do a ring gap tool, it will come up. Okay. Summit Racing, piston ring filers. Yeah, Summit Racing has a bunch of them. Part number is SUM dash, that's $900 or $750. Oh no, here's one that's a lot less. This one's $260. The Total Seal one is $870. That's the one that we have. The Low Buck Summit one is SUM-906797. 906797. Do your cams come with a darker finish than others? Looking at a BTR truck Norris cam, they're polished, almost chrome. The guys at Brian Chili Racing do a different finish on their camshafts. They do a, I think it's called a micro polish or something, so that it's almost like, it almost looks like a chrome finish. I mean, it's not, they don't put something else on there. They just polish it. I think the bottom end torque is going to make all the difference. 10 psi at 2500. Yeah, that would be good. Richard, I think he used to have some mock-up pictures and CAD drawings of clearance on his website. Oh, did he have for the? I just want to see if a turbo, like here's my dilemma. I wouldn't mind putting something on my truck, but I'm concerned on the truck. I mean, we're going to do it anyways, but taking the exhaust manifold off, I have my fingers crossed and probably should take bets on how many broken exhaust bolts I have when I take the exhaust manifolds off. So great car, buying another one. Okay. Oh, you're going to get an MR2? Cool. Yeah, Neil, I agree with that. Way more misses than hits. If you buy eBay, Amazon turbo kits, you need a good welder or standby because they will fall apart. There's stuff that you want to be good. The manifolds, I mean, if you buy a cast manifold like on Amazon or eBay or wherever, that's probably pretty good. The only thing that concerns me on those things are fitment, but I wouldn't be worried about strength on a cast piece at all. Would the low buck ring gap tool work the same as the $800 Total Seal one? No, it's not going to work exactly the same. I think that the low dollar one from Summit will do what you need it to do. I think that the Summit has one, and also the guys from Total Seal have one. I think the Total Seal one's nicer, but you can still get done what you need to get done. What do you think about the Summit Ghost Cam for an L96? The turbo 223, 234, hoping negative 2 degrees will help back pressure. It won't. An L96 is pretty big motor. So that's the thing that I would be concerned with. You don't need a camshaft that's that big for a 75 millimeter turbo. You can run a much smaller cam if you want more boost response, and you could still do everything that turbo wants. So that's usually where the direction I steer people. Put a smaller cam in it. I mean, we could do way more than 1,000 horsepower with the low buck truck camshaft. So the camshaft, the problem is a lot of people think that the camshaft holds power back on a turbo motor, and it doesn't. I mean, a stock one will, because you have to run so much boost. But if you have a turbo that's capable of 1,000 horsepower, like we're going to have here in the next week or so, we got stuff that will go a good bit over that. But if you have that turbo, you don't need a bigger cam to get that. Like I said, 1,000 horsepower with a low buck truck camshaft, very easy, and it's only like a 212 cam. How much power difference in an LT truck application with a 540 lift cam versus a 630 lift? I would need to know more than that. The lift is not the thing that I look at. I would need to look at. And I doubt that a 540 lift cam is going to have the same specs as a 630 lift cam. And then I would need to know the other things that are going on with the motor, like what size is the motor, what is the intake manifold. Richard, are you any closer to a new cam for the website? We are closer, yeah, but that's not going to be for a while. That sort of process takes time. Cool garage trick. If you buy the cheap hand crank grinder from Jegs or Summit, you can remove the crank handle and chuck a drill on it and run it bench mounted for much less than buying the electric. Yeah, I've done that, but the one that they sell that's the lower dollar one is not one of those hand grinder ones. They sell those too, and those are cheap. And we've put drills on those before, but that's also like doing a whizzy wheel, except that you can mount the thing stationary a little bit better than the whizzy wheel. We just mounted the drill in a vise and had the whizzy wheel on it, or an air one. Air one's just kind of loud, but then as long as you can keep it running, and then you just touch on a little bit. But the one that they have that's 260 is actually a ring grinder. What gaskets do I use to put a Gen 5 rec port head on my Gen 4 Big block. I don't know. I'm going to try to look up more information on those so I can have part numbers, because people want to know that. They ask the interchange all the time about the Mark IV and Gen 5 and Gen 6 stuff. And so I'll try to get more information from, I don't know if Brule will know the part numbers. I can ask him, but otherwise I'll try to get a hold of the Felpro guys. Had a Tennessee state trooper almost take me out. He was sitting in some woods. Someone passed him speeding. He floored it. Apparently he didn't look. I was locked up and almost lost control. Uh-oh. Fast y'all think a cam L92 crew cab Silverado would run in the quarter? How fast? Is that the question? Very close. We still got the speeder. There you go. I don't even know what a stock one runs. Weld a nut on the exhaust studs and brake, and they will come out with your fingers after that, but use pliers because it will be hot. Yeah, we've done that a lot. We've done that a lot on the motors that I get from the wrecking yard. We had to do that a bunch to the 4.8. The thing is, it gets harder to do with the engine in the vehicle. So we know how to get those out. It's just a lot of time and effort. And especially when it's in the car. And then welding on the motor in the car is not fun. That's only if they break with some sticking out. If they break down at the, head level, then it becomes a drill and tap kind of thing. In fact, we had to do that on this motor. Troy did that the last time we were down there. Can't remember if he did it on this one. I think he did it on this one. Or the 6-liter that we ran. We had to drill and extract a couple of them out because they were broken down inside the hole. Using stock pistons with 08 rec port heads and a single plane intake manifold and a 454 stock pistons. What is the max power I could get? I don't know. It would depend. The max power question is never really a good question because I don't know what those heads flow. And then I don't know how much camshaft you can put in there. I think that you're limited in piston to valve before you run into like whatever the maximum cam you could put in something like that is. I have a 305 LB9 board 30. I'll be putting a mild ported 350 Vortex on it. 212, 224. You have a 305, it's not going to make 400 or 300 at the tire. Use the smallest cam necessary for a nicer, easier to live with car. Most people would be happier with that. That's why that low buck truck camshaft sells so well. Is because it's got an ideal combination of, just has the right amount of chop, but makes good low speed power, carries the power nicely at the top. It has a good average power production. Obviously, like they all do, works good with the turbo. Okay, Gen 4 cooling parts are round and the Gen 5, 6 stuff has more oval cooling ports on the deck. That's not what I'm worried about on those. There might be some of that, but I thought that the positions were different too of the cooling holes. Maybe still impossible to drive the Sentra. The throttle body gets stuck slightly open. I don't know why. Does the throttle body itself need to be cleaned or anything? If you're lucky, it's leaking enough oil. It's self-lubricated like mine. They all came out easy on my 2008. Mine is leaking oil. I don't know that it got on the exhaust manifolds. But it's all over we changed the rear main on that thing. And when I had the intake off, when I was checking for the I was checking for the knock sensors, which by the way was just unplugged. There was nothing wrong with the knock sensors. That was on me. But you find that out, or I found that out after I took the intake manifold off. So, that happens. It just goes to show you how much I know about LS motors. But when taking that off, there is oil everywhere, all over the bell housing and all that stuff. So I'm not, it might be a valley. I thought that we changed I really need to go just put gaskets in it. The motor needs to come out and I need to, at the very least, I need to go and unstick all the rings and stuff, which I'm sure are like that, given the amount of miles that it has. But I did fix that. So it doesn't have a check engine light. And then another one came on and I'm like, what's going on here? And then it turned out to be, I forgot I think Troy sent me the codes. So let's see here. So you guys this will be fun for you guys. Okay. So we got two codes, a PO 175, System 2 Rich, Bank 2. And then a PO 172, System 2 Rich, Bank 1. And so what I did was when it showed a code for one side, I thought, okay, maybe it's a bad oxygen sensor. Those are probably the original oxygen sensors. So what I did was switch it to the other side. And then I drove it around and the light came back on after a while. And then it showed, okay, it's on the other side, but now it's on both sides. Like, I thought if I switched it and it showed it on the other side, well, then that's just that bad oxygen sensor. And the upshot of all of this is I changed both sensors and now there's no lights on. So it seems to be running good. And it's making more power now because I could tell by the way how it feels. It has timing in it. It likes having timing in it. Life is easy with small block. All parts are interchangeable. Google says Felpro 1037s to put the Gen 5.6 heads on a Mark IV. I thought that's what it was. See if a 47 also works. Do 317 valves clear the bore on a 5.3? Yes. Yeah, very easily. The factory runs 799 heads, which has the same valve sizes. 799s and 243s on 4.8s and 5.3s, so it clears fine. If it's leaking oil in multiple places, check your PCV valve. Maybe clogged, causing the oil to blow out. It's not really a PCV, more like a pinhole in that 3/8 tube. The one coming out of the valve cover. HP tuner and delete codes like a madman. Well, and I don't even. That's one thing that I like to reach out to whoever the sponsors are that keep inundating me with information. I need one of the sponsors to step up with a code reader. So if you're out there and you are a company that sells code readers or whatever, and you want me to promote that, let me try it and I'll see if it works. But I do need one of those because Troy kept having to do it, or Mark Sanchez when I was down there. So he kept having to clear the codes every time. But now it seems like it's okay because I drove it all the way home and so there's no codes on it right now. I need to give a big shout out to Jimmy for he helped me order some BTR valve seals through your site. We weren't listed to work with the 560 springs. Okay. Second, I placed a big order through your site shortly after that, and you combine the two orders to save me on shipping. Yeah, we'll try to do that. Jimmy's really good about that. So I'll tell Jimmy if you're watching. Shout out to Jimmy. Seen a couple of times studs broken below the surface, and they built it up with weld and a nut. Yeah, I've seen that. In my Gen 4, I had issues with the PCV after 100,000 miles. Leaky injector. Ryan, that's the next thing I was thinking is when I switched them after we put the new O2 sensors in, if that didn't cure it, that's what we were thinking. I had already, when we were doing the blower stuff, I had taken the injectors out and we flow tested them. They all seemed to be good and even. And when we had them on there, we did a leak test on it. I didn't leave it on there for like 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. I don't know how long it would take for it to leak a little bit. But they didn't seem to be leaking when we checked them last time. Sorry for the aggressive autocorrect. 088 heads flow 320. That's a lot. Ideally, I would run pop-up pistons, but working with what I got, what would be the biggest cam as far as duration that I should run? It's going to be somewhere in the mid 230s on the intake. The exhaust you don't have to worry as much about. Yes, mine's also the valve cover PCV, but mine sprayed oil directly into that baffling issue with the design. Gets clogged easy. Okay. Yeah, I'll check it and see. What's the most lift? You're not, the lift is not an issue, Leighton. The lift doesn't come into play really for piston to valve clearance. That is all duration. What's the maximum lift I can run in 8.1? I don't know, but if you're trying to make power, lift is not what you should be looking for. The thing that you're going to want to change on the camshaft is duration. That's going to add the power. You're not necessarily going to have to add a bunch of lift. The thing that would stop you from adding lift is, and I don't know this off the top of my head, I don't know what the retainer to seal clearance is. So from the bottom of the retainer down to the valve seal, I don't know if there's a limit to how much that would kind of limit lift. The piston to valve thing doesn't limit lift. That's not a thing. I think that the 8.1 cam that I tested that I have the video up on was the like ZZ502 cam or something. It's not that big, but it did help with power quite a bit. When an engine is assembled, what's the proper way to check piston and valve clearance using a degree wheel? You can do a degree wheel to find out where the critical area is, but you don't have to do that. The way that I do it is I put checker springs on one intake and one exhaust valve. So you have the retainer and keeper and everything. You just put really, really light springs that you could push down by your finger. Then you have to make sure that we check it with a lifter that cannot compress. So sometimes the hydraulic stuff, even with a light spring, will compress. And so you got to do it so it doesn't do that. And then we put a push rod in it that is the correct length so that when we tighten it, we have the right amount of, we have zero lash basically. And then we spin it around. And then what I do is as I'm rotating it, and I don't necessarily care where the valve vent is, but what's going to happen is it's going to be 10 degrees before or 10 degrees after TDC is going to kind of be where the danger zones are. And you'll see that when you're doing it. But I just rotate the motor and just push down because you can push the rocker and the valve down with your finger when you have a light spring. And then you just get to a point where, okay, this is the closest point. This is where the danger area is. I mean, if it hits, then you have a problem. It doesn't work. If it doesn't hit, you'll be moving it down and go, okay, right here, wherever this position is. And it's going to, if you have a degree wheel on it, it's going to be 10 degrees before or 10 degrees after, kind of is a danger area. But when you're pushing it down with your finger, then I put a dial indicator on it and see how much that is. Okay, it's got 3 thousandths or 50 thousandths or 100 thousandths. If it's a lot, then you go, okay, this is the closest point. We don't have to worry about that. And the critical one is going to be the intake. You don't have to worry about the exhaust so much. ZZ502 cam, 527, 544. Yeah. My 8 AN fuel lines finally showed up, just waiting on pump now that the cage, not much more to do. List is getting shorter. And by the way, when I was down there, we made over 900 horsepower with a turbo thing. And we did it with a stock fuel rail and a single 3/8 line feeding the stock fuel rail. So I want to bring that up. Again, we'll be talking about all this in the videos. But because lots of guys will say, oh, I need a -8 in and a Y and 2 -8s and a return. And I'm like, you don't need any of that. This is a stock fuel rail on a Trailblazer SS with a single 3/8 line off of the -6 or -8 fitting coming off the air motor regulator because it's a deadheaded system. Again, a deadheaded system with that single rubber line hose clamped onto the onto the factory fuel rail. So you can get away with a lot, not get away with it, but there's more than enough fuel flow for that. Did the boating community kill the 455 volts? You just don't see them anymore. They don't make them, haven't made them for a long time. So you're dealing with a lot of older stuff, particularly the heads. I went through this on the big block Chevy stuff. Is it's just, factory iron heads are not good. Because at 8 degrees, the valve got closer. Will a larger lobe separation angle help piston to valve? Yes. A tighter LSA usually hurts piston to valve, and a wider LSA helps piston to valve. Our 19-pound injector is enough for 86 Fox, max ported GT40, performer intake, exhaust, stock cam. Yeah, more than likely. 19-pounders will do more than 300, I think. Times. Yeah, they're good for a little over 300. And you could turn, if you have an adjustable regulator, you can turn the static pressure up. And then West Build, you should put an air fuel meter on it just to make sure. Glad you mentioned fuel rails. My TBSS didn't come with them. I have to order some. We have, if anybody's interested, I'll sell it to you cheap. We had a Trailblazer SS shipped to us that we were going to test to make sure that it does what stock ones do. Because I have a factory one that came off of that other aluminum motor that I got. But it turns out it's a rec port one. So it's like an LY6 intake manifold. It's brand new. So if anybody's interested in that, let me know. Or we're going to have to send it back. Because I want to test a cathedral port one. The thing that we were interested in is somebody here mentioned that the angle of the injectors might not be the same on the aftermarket ones, or the I'm sure that the Dorman or somebody like that makes them, but that the angle of the injector might be different. So we want to check that and verify it. That is the same on the manifold that we got. It's just a rec port one, and which is a good manifold, makes the same power as an LS3 because I've tested that many times. So if anybody needs a shiny new one, let me know. But, and they advertise it as a Trailblazer SS intake manifold, but it's not, because it's a rec port, and that's not the same thing. Richard, what lifting duration would you recommend for a 408 Windsor for a street application? What is the rest of the 408? What cam spec would you choose for an 088 head on a 454? I wouldn't choose it based on the head. I would always choose a camshaft based on what you're doing with the motor. So do you want it to make, are you using a single plane manifold and you got gears in it or a converter? And are you wanting to drag race it? Or you want it to drive it around? You got a dual plane manifold on it. Those cams will be different, even though all of the things that you're saying there are the same. The SR71 killed all the vehicle 401s, yeah, all of them. I want an SS manifold. Yeah, we're going to have those on the site. I just want to verify that these are as good or as stock ones. My leaky intake gaskets cause oil leaks too. Yeah, we've seen that. I've seen that when we don't have, if you don't put bolts in those bolt holes for the intake manifolds, they definitely leak oil. A buddy of mine preaching to me about not running factory LS intakes under boost. He was saying something about plastic exploding under the pressure. No, that's 100% not true. We've run 25 pounds or more on stock stuff, so it's fine. You might be concerned about a nitrous backfire on a composite manifold. It'll definitely blow that up, but it'll break aluminum ones as well. Dorman sells a PI head for mod motors if you want to be down 25 to 30 horsepower from stock. Back to work. I was wondering if you've heard of a two-piece rear main seal seep when it first running the engine and after 1,000 miles it stopped. Did you put like stop leak in it? Or did it get some buildup in there or temperature change it? I just wonder what changed it. Yeah, Adrian, I knew you meant an intake manifold. That's been available for a while. I remember when everyone thought Subaru intakes couldn't take boost because they were plastic. Yeah, this composite thing, I don't understand it. There's thousands of guys out there running boost on truck manifolds and Trailblazer SSs. And I got a guy that asked me the other day about a fast. So wouldn't you worry about running boost? I'm like, well, we've run 28 pounds on one. So I don't know where you start to get worried at. If you're running 40 or 50, yeah, then I would probably pick something else. But not at the boost level that most guys are at. Single plane, stock pistons, 4-speed, weekend car. I want it to sound aggressive. Then well, you can't. You're gonna have to run something that's like mid 230s at 50 anyways. So you're looking at like a 230, 236, or a 234, 238, that kind of thing. Something in the mid 230s on the intake, and then you want more exhaust duration. Richard, I have the two intakes, rec port and cathedral port. The fuel rails are different for sure. No, I know the rails are different on those manifolds. The Trailblazer SS that's cathedral port has a different rail than the rec port one does. I know that because I have both of those. I have the one that came off of the LY6, and I have a Trailblazer SS. And I remember going through this when I first tested the Trailblazer SS. I already had the rec port version. I'm like, oh well, I already have a fuel rail for this, and I would have put it on after, like, when I was on the dyno. I'm like, oh yeah, this doesn't work. This is not the same. I've seen them seep and seal on different motors. Uh-oh. They're usually reinforced with a glass fiber. What lift should I be looking for? That kind of cam, that sort of hydraulic roller cam, which is what I think you should put in there, is probably going to be in the mid 500s. 550, 560, somewhere around there. I can look and see. Chevrolet. Mechanical flat tappet? No. Retrofit hydraulic. Yours is a Mark IV motor, right? So this is a retrofit hydraulic roller. So they got a 230, 236, and a 236, 242. If you want to have lots of like throaty sound, the Mother Thumper might work. 235, 249. I think that exhaust side will probably fit. Or the XR 288, which is a 236, 242. That's only 520, 540 lift. I was hoping that they had like an XFI thing. Retrofit. Oh, that's why we did it. We did the Extreme Marine stuff. So the Extreme Marine, the 284 Extreme Marine is a 230, 236, and a 547 lift. That's probably a better one. Drag race hydraulic rollers. Oh, those are all big boys. But something like that. And Comp isn't the only people that make those. There's other cams available, but something like that. Do you do custom tuning? No, I'm not a tuner. I don't tune factory ECUs. I only do the aftermarket stuff. We're going to be putting a Haltech on something, so shout out to the Haltech guys. And then the stuff that we just did was with the Holley HP. I've heard tuners not wanting to tune sheet metal intakes from the cheap ones blowing up, but they prefer the GM intakes from what I've heard. Just a new seal, new crankshaft, never dripped, just slightly wet. Would wipe it off, change the oil from the leak, and check it clean after 500. Hey, if it's sealed up, that's a win. Richard, if I run a high-gram with twin 4150 throttle bodies on a stroked LS, what should I run? Fuel via TBI or rails? You can do it either way. It will make a little bit more power probably with throttle body injection if you introduce the fuel up at the top like you do with carburetors. But you'll have more control over fueling with port injection, so rails down at the bottom. Because you'll be able to adjust the fuel individually if you want to do that, which you can't do with throttle body injection. But you get more fuel cooling through the throttle bodies. So again, life is always a trade-off. I got hydraulic roller lifters, but don't have the cam yet. I do have a steel core solid cam that needs a regrind. I could have it reground to be a hydraulic roller. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know who's going to regrind it. Maybe Schneider or one of those guys. Putting together a small buck 400, high rise 750, thumper cam, fuelie heads. I don't know. The heads are going to be holding you back. I don't. If the heads are not ported, I think that you're going to be sub 400 horsepower with that. Think you'd make a killing from tuning? Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to be a tuner. Many people take their cars that are tuning, wishing they made the power that you make. Well, on a chassis dyno, obviously you're going to make less than we do on the engine dyno, but getting the power, making the power at wide open throttle is not magic. It's very, very easy. You could teach anybody to do that in 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, when we run a motor on the dyno at wide open throttle, it takes maybe 5 or 6 pulls and it's done. It's not going to make any more power. There's no magic there. You just start low on timing. You give it the air fuel that it needs. You adjust that. Okay, look, we're running it like we take an NALS, run it 20 degrees or 23 degrees because it's not going to hurt itself. And then we run it and go, oh, look, it needs, it's rich here, it's lean here, whatever. And we always want to kind of start at rich. And then we start at rich. It's 10 to 1. Okay, we take away fuel. Now it's 11 to 1. Okay, now it's 12 to 1. Now it's 12 and a half. Okay, and then it didn't do any much going from 12 to 12 and a half. We could try a little bit leaner, and then we do that. And then we start adding fuel or adding timing to it. Okay, 20, 25, up to 30 degrees. And then it's done. And then it's because it's not going to make any more power over 30 degrees on LS typically. And then you're done. It makes all the power. No magic amount of anything is going to change any of that. So we're at the dyno. We're just asking what it needs. And having run hundreds and hundreds of these now, we know where it's going to want to make power. I still ask it every time, but I'm not usually, I haven't really been surprised by one that wanted, oh, this one wants 36 degrees because of whatever the reason is. I've never seen that. Oh, Crowers down the street. Yeah, they do good work there. Yeah, it doesn't have to be brass. I worry about the bronze gear, if that's what you're talking about. I worry about that. Just if they're going to do a cam, just have them match it to that, because it could be a steel gear too, depending on what your cam core is. If you're making 600 horsepower LS3, what fuel pump would you recommend up to 1,000 horsepower? So do you want a 600 horsepower pump or 1,000 horsepower pump? 1,000 horsepower pump is going to be like some twin pump kind of thing. We have the Hellcat Plus pumps. And a 525 might be able to do that, but I think I would rather go with 2 of those. Notice that the V8 guys like to have a cam that lopes at idle and sounds good while still having a turbo on it. Is it really necessary to have a cam like that to run 9s in the quarter with a V8? No, you could run 9s with a decent car and a stock cam and a turbo. Making the power is really easy with a turbo. You can do it with a small cam. Like I said, you just size the turbo to decide whatever power needs to run a 9. If that's 700 or 800 or 900 or 1,000, whatever the number is, you just have a turbo that does that. And then the camshaft dictates other things. It just dictates how quickly the turbo spools, what the motor sounds like at idle, like you're talking about, what kind of drivability it has. It just dictates other things. It's not going to dictate the power because the turbo does that. Do you have any recommendations to get into tuning? Any good reads or programs? Yeah, there's lots of stuff online. There are lots of tuning courses and seminars that you can go to. Ben over at EFI University. Holly has stuff online. The HP Tuners Academy is really good. Go talk to the people there. Low buck truck cams are shipping yet? Very shortly. They have arrived, and so now we should have them. I think at the end of this week, they should ship out. I'm loving daily driving the 408 small block Mopar. Just got to keep from going too fast so I don't get tickets. All per gallon is slightly gotten better for 10.2. Nice. I got a turbo shirt I made for my shop. I think we'd get a kick out of it. Can I send you one? Yeah, can you send me a picture of it, man? You don't got to spend the money on a shirt. With a 235, 240 cam, 550 lift, 088 heads, 54 pistons. I don't know about those heads. I just don't know. I don't know how well they work. Are they? I think I have some Summit stuff that we did with those heads are going to be better than stock 88 heads, though. Let's see here. Big block Chevy 454. So I'm looking up big block Chevy oval head test. Dart. Where's my final stuff? So if you take a look at the oval port video, you can kind of get an idea. Let's see. Dart oval S-cast. Okay. This is a 468. This had a dome piston in it. Oh, that's a 248 can. Never mind. That's all completely different. I don't know. Low to mid 500s, probably something like that. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I'm trying to look and see if there's something like that. I haven't run a lot of stock headed stuff. Yeah, I just don't really have anything that's like that. That one that we ran was a 468, but it had dome pistons and then it had a 248 cam in it, so it's not really. Any brand of bearings. There's Cleveite makes good stuff. There's a lot of guys that have good stuff. I'm going for 600. Maybe get. Doug, if you were the one asking about a 600 horsepower deal, just get our Hellcat pump, the Hellcat Plus 525. That's more than enough for that. My local machine shop uses Engine Tech, but they're always the cheapest on Rock Auto. We should start shipping. Oh, Jimmy's on. We should start shipping low buck truck cam back orders on Thursday, Jimmy said. Did you see your shout out, Jimmy? You got a big shout out there. Building a C30 square body, 4.8, sloppy stage 2, 799, 7875, hoping to be in the 700s. Yeah, that turbo will definitely get you there. That's a I think that cam's a little big for a 4.8. That's not what I would pick, but it will definitely get you there. Will the 600 lift springs work good with a Truck Plus cam? I see you sell 660s for that package. If you have a 600 lift spring, if you have something like that, you can use that. The cam's only 585 lift. Yeah, and Frank's right. Slide Mechanics has Matt has a lot of can tunes up there in the cabinet. You want to try a draw through on an Olds 455. I think your Buick blew up at 9 psi. It was a head gasket. I should be with a head upgrade. You don't need a head upgrade. That thing didn't break because something was not strong enough. I'm sure it had some other kind of issue. I'm going to drive the van to Bakersfield to race it in a 7.0 class. Hopefully I can get it done with less than a 400 shot of nitrous. There you go. I used a lot of Engine Tech bearings, had no problems. Can a vehicle pass inspection with long tube headers? I don't know. Are the headers emissions legal? If they're not, I don't see how it would pass a visual. I think they have to have an executive order number on them. I've got to go take my truck in to get it smogged today. Hellcat pump needs adequate power and ground wiring. That's me how I know. Yeah, don't run speaker wire to your fuel pump. Engine Techs or King bearings. Yeah, King stuff is good. I'm trying to remember. ACL are the other ones that we've used. Those work good. I'll show you a picture maybe tonight of the 6-liter. I'll talk about the tales of woe on the 6-liter. I made a mistake. I was looking for my photo. Have some bearing issues. $12 for a full set of Engine Tech rod bearings on Rock Auto. Yeah, I don't know where that. I mean, if that's the right price, that's the right price. I don't know that that's where I would go cheap. I don't normally go cheap on. We didn't even have a poll. We'll have to have a poll for tonight. Yeah, we'll have to have one tonight. We got one more minute. I didn't even have to put in my knock sensor stuff. I opened one of the little caps up and I'm like, there's not even anything down in there. That looks brand new. It's perfect. Perfect in every way. And chock full of turbo-y goodness. Have you ever seen a head gasket failure burn through a head? I have on aluminum head. I did that on my Mustang when I was running the R trim and didn't have enough fuel. It torched right through the side of the head. Because it will burn through the easiest thing. And so it scored the block a little bit, but that was easy to fix. But it melted a big chunk out of the head. Need 3800 cams. I agree. That would be good. Doing a 5.3 to 6.0 swap. Debating if I should even modify or just stick with it and send it. It's a daily driver. A 6-liter swap will be good. If it's an LQ4, it's actually not going to make it's not rated at a whole bunch more peak power than a 5.3 is, depending on which 5.3 it is. But it will be a lot more torque. And if you put 706 heads on it, it would be better. You should put a little cam in there, I think. Just put a low buck truck camshaft in there. 7870 VS Racing versus a 7675 on 3. I never tried any of the on 3 stuff. And honestly, if those are comparable specs for the inducer and exducer on both those turbos, I think you're nitpicking. Rock Auto has a lot of high-end brands cheap. I torched the 2J head. Yeah, in any aluminum head, if you get stuff hot enough, I mean, we sent a piece of like molten piston through the head, so it was not good. It was too lean for too long. And at wide open throttle, I was going 193 miles an hour. 3800 cams are expensive. They are, I agree. So are Hemi cams, and so are some of the other stuff. VS Racing is better customer service. Yeah, I got nothing but good things to say about the guys from VS Racing. Byron's great. Every time I've talked to them, they do good stuff over there. I'm 2 for 2 on 706 heads being cracked. I won't run them ever again. Then just get 862 heads. If you go to a wrecking yard, there's a bajillion 862 heads there. Same head. Modular Ford cams are $800. They that's problematic with the modular stuff, particularly the 4-valve stuff. You know, 4 cams is just an expensive proposition, which is why a lot of guys don't do it. The Cobra guys, the cams didn't sell very well, nor do Coyote cams, especially when, I can make 3,000 horsepower, like what's his name, untouched. No, you can't do that. But you know, people want to believe that you can make a ton of power with a Coyote, though. What heads do you recommend for a small buck 400? That depends on what your budget will allow. You can make a lot of power. An Airflow Research head is good. Like their Enforcer head is a really good choice. Skip White has some stuff. TrickFlow has some stuff. TrickFlow has some new aluminum heads that I'm going to be running that look like they're an aluminum version. They look like a Fuelie head, but they're not. They're way, way better. And so those are also a good choice. Why all the complaining about damaged aluminum heads? TIG welded and machined them up. Yeah, we just fixed them. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. It just takes, time and money. My coworker tells me to save the Olds 455 and destroy LSs with boost. That's a tall order. Just make the Oldsmobile better. That's all you have to do. Stock cams and turbos, that works good too. You have all the things that you have with a stock cam still there. You just now have more power depending on where you put the boost at. It all works good. And on that note, it is time to go, but I will be back tonight. So please join me on the live feed tonight, and I will see you guys all later.